Well, that was an adventure. Singed a bit, were you?
Hello everybody, so this is a video where I'm going to attempt to try and articulate what I've been thinking about pulp science fiction, and that kind of science fiction where it's just fun, not very sciencey, doesn't take science very seriously, and it's using the setting of science fiction, space, different planets, aliens, to kind of create adventure stories. So this goes right back. So, you know, often we talk about Mary Shelley's Frankenstein being the first science fiction book, and that is clearly a lot deeper, and it's very philosophical, and it's about life, and it's about creation, it's about all sorts of things. So fast forward from that, and then you've got people like Edgar Rice Burroughs and H.G. Wells, in a way, doing more pulpy stories that are imagining what Mars might be like, and imagining what these other planets might be like, and imagining what it might be like if you were embroiled in you know, as a human, you just sort of get thrown into the middle of a turf war or something on Mars, or that kind of thing. Those kind of things are what I would consider to be like pulp science fiction. So the sort of the science fiction that was there just to entertain, you know, and not go particularly deep. And I was thinking about how I was just wondering whether it was old-fashioned now and not really something that people like to write or like to look for as readers, and if you have to go right back to the past to find that. And I don't think that's true, because I've got a conclusion at the end of this that I think is more interesting than just saying it's something from the past. But it was just a funny thing where so many, if you look at the general science fiction shelves in bookshops, it tends to be new authors writing often sociological studies using a science fiction setting, or very deep character-based explorations of gender or race, or you know, some of the important political issues of the time, and you don't normally see fluff on the shelves. So I was thinking about the fact that I've just started Edgar Rice Burroughs' first book, which is Princess of Mars. So I'm not very far into it, but this was his first book, which is interesting, isn't it? Because obviously he's very famous for Tarzan, and I have got Tarzan I'm going to read at some point. I've got that just there. I've got the first book. And I did read last year, literally a year, about 13 months ago, I read Arthur Conan Doyle's The Lost World. And The Lost World's kind of like that. It's that sort of pulpy element of just making up something scientific that probably isn't true about this sort of island that they find full of dinosaurs. And, you know, it's where science fiction delves further into fantasy, isn't it? Let's face it. So this would be true about this, because clearly we know more about Mars now. We know that this is probably not what you're going to find on Mars. So in those days, they didn't know that, so they had to make it up. They had to sort of, in some sense, it was more romantic because they could make it up. You know, now our images of Mars are a lot less romantic. So anyway, there's a whole series of books in this Princess of Mars, John Carter books. I've got this many, so I've got a bunch of them. That's 6 of the series, and I have got a second one. Apparently, the second one is The Gods of Mars. So I'll be able to sort of go into that one afterwards. But yeah, clearly Mars was a bit of a mystery to people in 1922 when this came out, and after that as well, because I think even when Ray Bradbury wrote The Martian Chronicles, they didn't know what Mars was like. So it's a bit of a luxury that our scientific knowledge is so brilliant now. And obviously, as scientific knowledge improves, then there's a lot of pressure to not be so romantic about something next door to us when we know that it's not what this book says it is. So it kind of limits. You have to go further out if you're going to be that pulpy, which does happen. We'll get to that at the end. So So yeah, and I've also bought this as well, The People That Time Forgot, and I think that's another thing that is that kind of like, you know, I'm gonna create science fiction that doesn't really have a particularly academic attitude to science. So there we go. So Edgar Rice Burroughs, I think, was a nice way for me to. I was in my mind because I was reading that book, and I thought it's just an interesting subject to think about. The fact that it would be so hard now to find in the main shelves, the main science fiction section, to find something that was really pulpy and non-sciencey. I think there's a lot of pressure nowadays to make the science realistic, to make it proper science fiction, you know. I think basically, if an author wrote something that was completely fantastical but had a science fiction setting, I think they'd be criticised for just not doing enough research and just putting out a load of toss. So I think that's interesting, because that wouldn't have been a criticism when we didn't know as much. So our scientific knowledge has limited authors like that, hasn't it? When we praise Andy Weir, we praise him because he does his research. He spends ages doing research on his books, and you know, there's a lot of, you can see it in the text. But even if you didn't see it in the text, he talks about it in interviews. In fact, he spends months researching these things and make sure that he's not being too inaccurate while also telling a story. So he does that because he has to nowadays, you know. So if he's just setting his story on Mars with The Martian, which is a nice comparison, obviously, because we've just been talking about that, the more fantastical version of Mars. But his version of Mars in The Martian is what we know as Mars now. And obviously with Artemis, it was set on the moon, and he had to do some research on how that would work, if there was some sort of colonization in some sort of soft way. And then I haven't read Project Hail Mary yet. It's up there, and I'm going to read it soon. I can't wait. But again, I have seen him in interviews say that he did a lot of research for that as well. So this research is a big part of this science fiction thing, isn't it? So I was going to talk about Harry Harrison, because Harry Harrison was an author that was one of my starting points. So if you look back on my videos, there's one moment where I talk about what got me into science fiction, and really novelizations of films like Star Wars and Indiana Jones, in terms of Doom, E.T., those kind of novelizations, those films when I was a kid, were what I was reading when I wasn't reading what I had to read for school. And that was what got me into science fiction. But when I went beyond that, it was this guy that got me really into reading stuff that was nothing to do with films and nothing to do with school. Stainless Steel Rat. So Jim DeGriz, there was something about those 5 books. I've got the 4th and 5th one here. I've got all of them. I've got there's about 9 of them now, and I've got them all. But I just got these 2 out. 2 of my favourite covers. This is an awesome cover in Stainless Steel Rat, one issue. I remember that being one of the funniest ones. There's one point where him and his wife and his 2 kids have to dress up as these blobby aliens, and they're just pretending to blend, which sounds like something out of my last novel, Brownie Up Gang. But I love that. So they are comedic. And what I was going to say was that he in these Stainless Steel Rat books, he is very good at doing that sort of witty, either outright comedy like I've just described, or that sort of wisecracking sort of wit that you get from the main character in some of his other books. And I want that. I want comedy in my light, soft, fluffy, non-sciencey science fiction. I really want comedy. And when something's a bit drier, and I think Edgar Rice Burroughs was probably going to be more serious. I haven't seen any comedy in it yet. But if it is more like that, then it's still fun and still adventurous, and it's still, you know, great to see them explore what they would like aliens to look like and stuff like that. But it's not as fun to read, because, you know, it's nice to when an author makes you smile or makes you laugh. And Harry Harrison can do that quite well. And those Stainless Steel Rat books especially, they are quite funny. Not in a Hitchhiker's way. So Hitchhikers is out and out funny, and he tries to get you to smile or laugh in every paragraph. That's not the same here. So it's more adventure than funny, but it is funny. And then you've got stuff like Invasion Earth, which is a great sort of, Earth like alien invasion stories are great, but also if they're quite light and fluffy, then it can be just a bit of fun, not particularly heavy. But again, War of the Worlds is not very long, and it's a bit pulpy. H.G. Wells was kind of creating a new thing, wasn't he? Star Smashers of the Galaxy Rangers. I'll just tell you the plot of this. So Chuck and Jerry, two fun-loving students at an American college, discover a faster-than-light space drive and smuggle it into a football team's plane. I don't need to read any more to tell you that is clearly an adventurous, very light-hearted adventure story set in a science fiction setting. Star Smashers of the Galaxy Rangers. I mean, just the title alone makes it sound like, it's a bit of fun. So that is a bit of fun as well. I've read that one as well. I've read tons of Harry Harrison. And then recently I reread this, Death World, which was... it had a bit of an undercurrent about the way we treat... the way we sort of just stamp on another planet's life and just assume stuff. But to be fair, only lightly. It's not as heavy as something like Little Fuzzy, which I think was definitely making a point. I don't think he's making a big point here. I think it is definitely that adventurous thing. And there's a little bit of humour in there. It's a little bit old-fashioned, but I really liked rereading this recently. I'm going to reread Death World 2 and Death World 3 as well. But again, Harry Harrison was good at doing that kind of thing. And I'm not ignoring the fact that he wrote Make Room, Make Room. So obviously Make Room, Make Room is a very important comment on overpopulation. It's one of the biggest issues that this planet faces. And, he wrote that ages ago. And it's a great book. Make Room, Make Room is a serious book that Harry Harrison wrote. But he tends to write fun, adventurous books. So I haven't read this, and I did mention Little Fuzzy, but H.B. Piper also wrote Space Viking. And I don't know what this is like. And to be fair, I read the back, and it doesn't actually it seems more military science fiction than pulp science fiction. So there might be some seriousness and some kind of like some heavy elements to it. But it might not be. It might be just a very light military sci-fi that ends up being quite pulpy. So anyway, I'm going to read that at some point. But Space Viking sounds quite pulpy. So we'll see. But that's another one I've picked up that kind of my brain flagged it when I was thinking about what I was going to do. But I haven't read it, so I can't tell you exactly how pulpy it was. But I did recently pick up, just again because I was interested in maybe finding some palette cleansers or something, a quick read just for adventure and stuff like that, and I found some Flash Gordon books. So Flash Gordon books are definitely that pulpy science fiction. So they're set on other worlds with different aliens, but he is definitely a heroic character that saves the planet, saves the men of Mongo. Through his athleticism probably, and his good nature and his heroic sensibility. Yeah, I'm gonna read these. It'll be a bit of fun, but again, you see, I don't expect it to be anything but a bit of fun. If it's deep and philosophical, I will be shocked. So I'm not expecting that from these books. I did read a couple of Flash Gordon books when I was younger, actually, really young, but that was a long time ago. So I've got these because I thought it'd be nice to get back into that world again. But again, like I'm saying, it's nice to do that, and clearly this is science fiction that is not going to be very accurate scientifically, and it's still science fiction. People will go, oh well, it's fantasy, isn't it? Well, no, because if you're going to say that, you're going to start judging every book on how accurate it is, and you're going to end up getting mixed up, because our scientific knowledge grows all the time. So you'll end up saying that only 10% of the books that call themselves science fiction are science fiction. So that's not a very clever thing to do. So I'm going to delve into that again. But one thing I was going to mention, again, this is a literary thing. I'm going to get into something else in a second. But these books by Peter Clines, the Ex-Heroes series, these are like comic book stories, but set as prose. So, they're clearly not comic books. And they're not like enormously short. They're not as short as, so like they're about 350 pages, so they're slightly longer than the old-fashioned like Edgar Rice Burroughs kind of books, but they're not any deeper. And this is literally superheroes fighting zombies, and I don't know. I think they're quite fun. I like there's one character in it I do like actually, and I think a lot of the other characters look up to her. She's like oh, what would she be like? Not sure, but anyway, I've read 3 of the books. I think there's 5 in the series. I've got 2 more to read. I own 4, and once I've read the 4th one, I'll get the 5th one, because I think I might as well. I think the first book is the best one, to be fair, but I'll finish the series. But again, see, they're just a bit of fun. They are literally not anything. They're enjoyable to read, and you're not going to get any deep philosophical discussions inside it, really. But you know, I don't think you should undersell that, though. You know, it's like what Ollie's been doing with the Garb August event. He's saying that there's a lot of value in books that aren't trying to change the world, and these books aren't trying to change the world. And to be fair, if you do get a book that's trying to change the world, sometimes it doesn't do it very well, you know, and it might be doing it and not actually telling a great story because it keeps stopping to try and change the world. So, you know, there's a lot of storytelling techniques in this that would be lost to someone that's just trying to make sociological points. So I do think that's true as well. So anyway, that's a fun series about superheroes fighting zombies. So moving on to what I was going to say about the fact that there is a place in the bookshops, I think, where you would find this kind of pulpy stuff, and it's in the TV tie-ins and the film tie-ins. So I think when you think about the general shelf of science fiction, as I said, it's mostly very deep and technical books that, if they're not hard science fiction, they might be quite political science fiction or sociological science fiction. So much more serious. Again, even if they're trying to be funny within the text, a serious point to the book. But the books that don't have a serious point, that are just that kind of fluff, are usually the things that you'd now find in the tie-in stuff, because that's kind of how the general public has embraced science fiction, you know, post Star Wars. You know, Star Wars made a big difference to Hollywood. It's been well documented, and it's been well documented that George Lucas wanted to make his own version of Flash Gordon and Buck Rogers. You know, he was heavily influenced by Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon, and he was also influenced by Kurosawa, and also the general kind of principle of the hero's journey and stuff like that. But Flash Gordon, Buck Rogers was what he had in his head for the setting, and that's pulp. And you know, Star Wars stuff is pulp science fiction, and this is why people like calling it science fantasy, because they don't like the fact that the science isn't particularly rigorous, to say the least. But you know, like I was saying about the fact you can't set things on Mars anymore and just have like clangers on it, because we know clangers aren't there. So what he does is he'll say a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, because he knows that no one can criticize him for being inaccurate. He doesn't want to be accurate. He doesn't want to look at the science as much, but he wants to use science fiction, as in he wants to talk about planets and aliens and space, you know. So just one more comment I was going to make about this, and that's this idea of humour. And something that is definitely pulpy and definitely doesn't take itself seriously and is very funny and is brilliant. I've mentioned it a few times on the channel. We'll Save the Galaxy for Food, Yahtzee Croshaw. I did that on my Must Buy Authors bit as well. But it's a lot of fun. It's quite short. Doesn't take, because actually the typing, oh, actually it's not that big. Yeah, it doesn't take long to read it. But it is a lot of fun. I would definitely recommend this. It's very funny. Laugh out loud funny, I'd say. But it doesn't take itself seriously. It's literally, you know, an adventure story about a cocky anti-hero smuggler who thinks he's better than everyone else and thinks he can con everyone. And then I've got the sequel up there as well. I can't actually bring it out because other books are going to fall, but it's that one. We'll Destroy the Galaxy for Cash, it's called. There's a couple of books on top of it. So yeah, I think that kind of thing is absolutely brilliant. I started reading properly through books like that, and I do value it a lot. And I read as much of it as I can find, really, while I'm trying to read deeper stuff as well. But I do think it's good when it's got a sense of humour. So yeah, I think the pulp thing is very close to my heart. But as I said, humour is a big element of that for me. So I'd love to know what you think about what authors you think today are writing pulpy, fun, sort of softer, not very sciencey science fiction, because it does seem to be quite unfashionable. So let me know what you think. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye.